Big Beach had long ago fallen into disuse, and the incline railway that carried sightseers to the top of Picnic Hill for a nickel was inoperative. Once a veritable gold mine of profitability, the Stork Club had recently closed. In the light of history, perhaps it's ironic that the city is now weighing the need for a $40 million performing arts center. In its heyday, the city-owned Stork Club was the place to go for live entertainment. The Stork Club was later purchased by Joe McManus and finally met its end when damaged beyond repair by fire. The most unusual of London's possessions, the London and Port Stanley Railway, still carrying freight in '64, was sold to Canadian National and shut down.
When you look around the village of Port Stanley today, there are a few reminders of that era. The once popular Stork Club is nothing more than a memory. The beachfront property where great bands like Guy Lombardo, Tommy Dorsey, and Duke Ellington played has given way to a new luxury condo development. The bathhouse, beach pool, and incline railway are also gone, all victims of time and neglect. The cement pads used to anchor the incline are still there, but barely visible through the trees and weeds. And now condos occupy Picnic Hill, where thousands of Londoners used to spend the day away from the heat of the city. However, the era isn't completely lost. Mackey's restaurant is still in business, and there's Port Stanley Terminal Rail, risen from the remains of the former l&ps railway by a group of area volunteers. It's now into its 6th full season.
Through their actions and through their volunteers, they've created something to draw tourists to Port Stanley, and they bring in about 80, 90 buses a year. Also, it gives another drawing card for Port Stanley to bring in the tourist train.
The little train runs from Port Stanley over 3 miles to the neighboring community of Union. The 50-minute excursions are offered from May through to December. The Terminal Rail Corporation is headed by CP engineer, President Brad Jolliffe.
It's very expensive to run a railway, even a short railway such as the one we have here. All the money is coming from revenue brought in from ticket sales and from souvenir sales in the gift shop here. We haven't received any assistance from any level of government or any grants of any sort, so it's all done with the revenues that we bring in from the train operations.
For many tourists, it's more than simply a train ride, but a step back in time, a bit of a history lesson as well.
This railroad was built about 130 years ago by men and horses using pick and shovel. And they built the railroad, laid the rails, did everything in 2 years so that they could overcome the Cordwood Road running between London and Port Stanley.
What's your thoughts of the train ride?
It's very enjoyable. It's very scenic. It's a nice time to spend with the family.
I think it's great. I love it.
Does it bring back some memories?
Oh, yes. Yeah, a few. The only thing is, we used to hang on the outside of the old ones.
Since 1966, the rail line between Port Stanley and St. Thomas has been owned by Canadian National. For the past several years, the Terminal Rail Corporation has been negotiating for it, and in early May, finally signed the deed of ownership. Now they're looking beyond tourism to freight.
At this point in time, we are investigating feasibility of freight operations from St. Thomas down to Port Stanley. It's just in preliminary stages right now. In fact, there's a feasibility study being done, the results of which should be out in another month or so, I believe. There is some real possibilities longer term of moving freight.
But Jolliffe says there are problems. Neighboring municipalities aren't keen about the idea, and CN is looking to rip up more track in St. Thomas, possibly isolating the terminal rail line. Lavereau says moving freight by rail is essential to the prospering community. With only 2 main roads in and out of the village, he admits they need something else.
I would think that the little terminal rail would be very beneficial to Port Stanley, in that we do have a transport problem in Port Stanley. Subsequently, if we create small, clean, light industry, Maybe we can fit in the little terminal rail to haul freight in and out of Port Stanley, and certainly that would help with the traffic situation.
If the possibility of moving freight doesn't fly in Port Stanley, Jolliffe says they'll continue rolling along just like before.
We see the freight as complementing the passenger operation. We've pretty well proven to ourselves that the passenger operation can stand on its own. As I mentioned earlier, we are bringing in sufficient revenues to pay all the expenses, so I think the passenger operation is going to be here for a long time.